Welcome to Dating Log, the podcast that records the ups and downs of dating in your 30s. I'm your host, Wyndham Juno, and this is episode 9, Anxiously Attached. Alice came onto our call with lots of energy and excitement, also with an apology and an explanation, #anxiously attached, but she was ready to share completely vulnerably with a total stranger. From the get-go, we had a super good flow. We touched on queerness, attachment styles, what do we actually want, and what if it's not what's expected of us. This conversation left me with energy for days, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. Enjoy!
I'm a 30-something. Well, I just turned 31 actually. My birthday was a couple of days ago, and I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. Yeah, I've worked a bit in some few other places, but home base is Nairobi, and that's where a lot of my dating life and stories have been. So I'm bisexual, pansexual. I use queer because it's just like I feel like it helps me. It feels like a very grounding space to stand on, because it's like I feel like I've been attracted to people who are of all different genders, so I don't really feel like I'm attached to one particular orientation, if that makes sense. I will say, because I was raised in Kenya, I think a lot of my dating experiences have been with men, but that's like something that I know is just like more circumstantial than like about me myself. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. How do you meet people when you go on dates?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I've used, yes, I just got out of a long relation. Well, yeah, like a year-long relationship with someone, a man that I met on Bumble, like a year and a half ago. And we dated for like a year, and then we just broke up very recently. Outside of him, I think I've met a few, I met a few other people on Bumble, but that's the first relationship that really took off and went somewhere. For the most part, I think it's been folks that I met through friends or at events. There is a very thriving queer scene in Kenya, even though it's underground for obvious reasons. And so, there'll be events and mixers and stuff. And so I used to attend those more often. And so I met people there. And then also like art events at galleries tend to be like a really like it's not I did meet someone there once, actually two different people at an art event, and ended up dating both of them separately. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of everything, but like more often than not it's in person, and it's a friend of someone else that and then I don't know how the online dating scene is in Nairobi. I have quite a few friends who've married, not in Nairobi though, like people in the States who married folks they met on the apps, but I feel like it's not as much. Well, I don't know in Kenya, maybe it's not. It's hard for me to tell how common it is in Kenya right now. Yeah, so for me it's usually a mix, but for the most part it's been folks I met in person.
Is that how people are generally meeting other people in Nairobi? Because you say you don't really know, but what about your friends? What are they doing? How are they finding dates?
It's funny because I studied in the US, and then I came back to Kenya after graduation. And so I have a pretty good mix of friends who are based like many of them abroad, but then a lot of them also based in Nairobi. I would say that for my friends who are based in the States, like last year I went for a wedding, and this year I'm going for 2 weddings where they met their person on an app. Right. So it's like as far actually like, and I think as far back as like 2018, I was going for weddings where people met online. When I think about the experience in Kenya, I think 2 things. It is happening, but perhaps one thing that kind of masks it is that you end up meeting the people you meet online tend to be folks who are in your circle anyway. Like Nairobi, the middle class community is not that big. It's quite incestuous, you might say. So you will end up meeting folks that you probably would have met anyway through like 1, 2, 3, 4 connections. So it's not that far removed. So even when I know of folks who've met online in Nairobi, it's tended to be they've met people who it turned out they knew, or like I knew or someone else knew. So it's often been like there's still like some sort of connection that would have brought them together anyway, I guess. Yeah.
You mentioned that you were just out of a year-long relationship. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, so it's still, I feel the thing about breakups, especially when it's someone you really cared about, which I really cared about him, is that it's one of those things where I feel like first I was not okay like 24/7 and I was, a bit of a mess. And then now I feel like I'm okay most of the times. And then every so often someone will ask me how I'm doing and I'm like, oh, actually I am still kind of sad about it. It's so, I don't know, I feel a little emotionally unavailable. It's tough. I feel kind of stuck right now because it's been long enough that I don't know if we'll get back together. Like it doesn't feel like it's something that's on the table right now, but it hasn't been long enough that I can think about moving on with someone. And so in that way, I kind of feel like I'm stuck in limbo in this in between spot. I recently like went on a couple of I don't even know if we'd call them dates, like hangouts with someone who seems quite promising and maybe in a different point in my life would have been, but then I literally feel like I feel like a complete asshole, to be quite honest. And I'm probably not doing anything that's too assholey, but I just like I've been on the other side of this, and so I just feel like like I'm the worst. Yes, it's tough. It is.
Can you tell me about these couple of dates, hangouts you went on?
Yeah, so it's he's a friend of like we have mutual friends, and so I met him at a gathering, like it was just like a party, and it really does feel like it's like always wrong timing because the first time when we met, I was just getting into this relationship, and so we didn't see each other for a while, and then we met again now, and now I'm single, but like, and so like we it was like it was a friend's birthday, and first we went out into like we were somewhere out of town, and then we were driving back in, and so he drove us there and back because we had to we coupled in a couple of groups, and so at some point he and I were just like driving the car, and it was very comfortable, very easy, and just like really nice conversation. And then after that, we hang out again another time, and then I left. I traveled, so we haven't been able to see each other since. But we've been talking pretty frequently, or we had been at some point, and then I kind of like wasn't as like I was also like other things are happening, but it's. I think so. Are you familiar with attachment theory and attachment styles?
Yes, but no one's talked about it on the podcast yet. So please go ahead, explain a little bit and say what you want to say. Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, so basically it's, and I mean, like this, of course, there's always like it's scientific, quote unquote. Like there's always questions about how correct it is, but basically it's the idea that like based on how we attach to our caregivers, i.e. our parents or whoever brought us up, we have certain habits or certain strategies that we lean on when we are attaching to romantic partners, but also to friends. Basically, like how I mean, it's like the basic science or the basic facts of it are depending on the home you were raised in, like you show up in certain ways in your relationships as an adult. And there's like tests and stuff, and I can send this to you afterwards. But like I've done this test, like I do this test very regularly to kind of keep tabs on my attachment style. Which I just feel like, yeah. And the first time I did this test, I was anxiously attached, which I feel like I think if you're anxiously attached, you're probably the person who's doing this test, because anxiously attached people tend to like, well, people who have anxious attachment are probably the ones who are most invested in like figuring out what's going on with them, because what it means is that in relationships, anxiously attached people tend to take on more of the blame when things go wrong, and more of the burden for like initiating. So anxiously attached people tend to take on more of the effort on that side, and then avoidantly attached people would be on the other side, so they tend to retreat, and they're less like they're more self-sufficient, and when how they show up in relationships is very much reflective of that. I've really butchered it, like there are really good articles about this. And then there's like the lucky few people who are securely attached, which means they walk into relationships and they're just like, I don't even like, for me, it's a learning process. I've been figuring out with my therapist, like, okay, so sometimes I'll tell her something and she'll be like, yeah, that like that's your attachment style. And I'm like, wait, like what do securely attached people do? Like it really for me is like this big mystery. Like, what do people who are securely, but basically if you grow up and your parents were receptive and your home was calm and like, and they were attuned to your needs, like you show up in life like knowing that the world will take care of you, and and that for me is like, because I had like a crazy upbringing, and my folks had like their own, like my parents were divorced, and it was like a really messy divorce. So I feel like for me, the idea that like the idea of like calm, it's just like not consciously I wouldn't say it, but then subconsciously I feel like I would gravitate towards like mess, or towards like things that were not calm and easy. Yeah, and so, and then the fun, like, so yeah, so the like God's chosen few are securely attached, but then some people happen to have like elements of both anxiously and avoidant, like they're both anxiously and avoidantly attached, because like, like if you went through some shit when you were younger, it tends to reflect. And like none of this is set in stone. Like you can start off secure and maybe have a bad dating experience and then end up being a little more avoidantly or anxiously attached. Or you can start off anxious and then kind of like work your way to something that's more secure. So I feel, so I've been doing, anyway, all of this is to say, when I first did this test, I thought I was anxiously attached. I came, like it said I was anxiously attached, and I've been trying to do the work, like get to a more secure attachment, which is just like a lot of therapy and a lot of like work on like my trauma and like things that I wasn't aware of that I was carrying, or beliefs that I had about like relationships. So yeah, so anyway, so it's, but where all of this was going, I feel like I just like went on such a tangent, but like where all of this was going was, I was gonna say that like this is because I'm actually attached, I'm very self as actually attached. When I think about my dating relationships, I'm very accustomed to being on the side where I'm trying to like win someone over, or I'm trying to convince someone to like, you know. So now that I'm like just out of this relationship and I'm in this position where someone is trying to like build that connection, and I'm not as receptive or as like engaged as I normally would be, it's like a very odd experience for me. I feel like, oh, like this is what, like maybe like this is like what it is to be on the other side of that. It feels strange. It just feels like it's not what I'm used to, if that makes sense. So I'm used to being the person who's like, yeah.
And you've, in the meantime, since your, let's say, last relationship in the last years of your life, you've been doing therapy and you've become aware of these things. And now you've reached another level, I guess, of approaching dating and relationships. Is that right?
I think part of it is that, like, I definitely think that I'm more securely attached now than I was a couple of years ago. But I also, I mean, I do recognize that I'm emotionally unavailable right now. And so, yeah, and so it's almost like, okay, maybe, and, it is what it is. Like, it makes sense that when you've just gotten out of a relationship, you wouldn't be immediately ready to jump into something new. But it's always it's very unusual for me to be, it feels, I don't know, it just feels unusual. It feels odd.
I have so many questions, but do you notice a difference in the dating scene between, let's say, the heteronormative world and the queer world?
Um, I think yes. And then I think there's the added element of living in a country where your existence is criminalized. So I think there is, and I think, yeah, for sure, that like the messiness and the chaos is still, I don't think it's unique to the heterosexual world. I think it looks different, right? Like I think that, when I'm thinking about dating a man in Nairobi, I'm thinking about the gender dynamics in a certain way. I'm thinking about the fact that, oh, is he going to be like a misogynist guy? Like, are we going to sit down, like the first few things he says are terrible? Or are we going to like have a nice time? And then I start to notice things here and then I'm like, oh, hold on a second. Like, is this someone I want to be with? Right. So you're always kind of like making those deliberations as you go along. And with queer people, maybe that is, or with queer women, with women, it's not as much of a consideration, but then you're also thinking like, is this someone who is still not at peace with themselves, or is still kind of struggling with their sexuality? And I've been talking with like some friends of mine, and one of them was talking about how now that she's getting to a point where folks are partnering up and getting married, there's always the question of like, okay, well, if you're queer, how are you going to navigate that, right? Like, do you get married and just invite your friends? Are you going to essentially hide a whole marriage from your family, right? So I think, maybe that's the thing that seems to kind of exist in in all of these spaces, the idea of secrets, right? So like, there's almost like, I don't, I don't think it's just about like yes, part of it is like hiding relationships from other people. So like whether you're queer and hiding your relationship from people who are very important in your life, or you're straight and you have you're having an affair and you're hiding that from important, like, or you're hiding a family from another part of your life, right? So there's idea of like secrecy, I think, but I think it goes even beyond that. I think that even when people are together in relationships, sometimes I don't, I think there's still a lot of secrecy even within the relationship, even when it's not about infidelity.
You mentioned that your friends and let's say people around you are reaching the point where they partner and marry. What are the societal expectations of that in Nairobi? And do you feel that pressure or?
A few years back, I was talking to someone and they said something like it felt like it was that game. Is it like musical chairs where the music is playing and then the music stops and everyone grabs a chair and you're just like, wait, hold on. Like, I didn't know we're playing this game. And she said at the time and I laughed about it. And recently I'm like, oh, I actually kind of see it. Because I feel like, so I have like you saw, like every year one or two friends will get married, right? And this has been the last couple of years, it's been happening every year. Whereas there was a time when I felt like we were all single, like someone would be dating someone, but you kind of didn't know where it was going to go. And now it's like someone brings their partner to the wedding and their wedding is going to be in like the next year or two. Like it's become a thing. It's like a rite of passage. And I have yet to take a partner to I've yet to like go with a partner to a wedding. Usually not even because it's planned or anything, just like a logistical thing. Like it's never worked out like that I could go to a wedding at a place and my partner was also available. So I've never taken a partner to one of these weddings, but I definitely feel like if I was to invite someone, I'd have to think about it very seriously and have to be like, okay, like, is this someone that I see myself getting married to in a couple of years? Because I can't take you to this wedding and then keep getting asked about you for like, the foreseeable future. So I have to like be very, very like particular about it. And same with introducing folks to your parents. Like, I feel like when you were younger, you could get away with introducing someone and, there's no, like, it's like, okay, that's your friend. But now I feel like you have to be, I don't know. I just feel like nobody's putting pressure on me and my family or anything. But I just feel like before I introduce them to somebody, I have to be ready for the fact that they'll want, they'll be like, oh, is this something? Like, are we going to keep, I think there's more of a sense that like, if you're introducing someone to your family right now or to your close friends right now, there's an expectation or an understanding that, oh, this could be something that lasts for a while. I don't, nobody in my family, like my mom, so my mom doesn't put any pressure on us guys. Like sometimes she'll say things like, oh, it would be nice to have grandkids, but then she's always like, but I'm not pressuring you. So it's kind of like, I think it's a nice to have, but I think for us, she's just like not as attached. She's more attached to the idea of us being happy and healthy than us being partnered up. I think it would be nice. I mean, it would be nice for us as well, but like, my younger sister is now dating someone pretty seriously and they moved in together. And I just feel like last ones really pushed the envelope of like, because my mom is super, super religious. So the fact that she's like accepted that my sister and has a live-in boyfriend and they're together and she visited them, I'm just like, wow, like really, like last one get a very different experience from the rest of us. Cause I feel like I would never have told my, like I would have moved in with my boyfriend secretly and just like never told my mom. But so yeah, but then so there's no pressure. My mom doesn't put any pressure on us, but I know folks who get that a bit in their parents, or usually actually it's not even your parents, it's probably like a nosy auntie or uncle somewhere who's like, what's the deal, what's happening. I think maybe like statistically, probably around this age is when like that pressure is higher for other people. Personally, I just don't. I feel like I'm very lucky. I'm very protected. Like it doesn't feel like I have to, on top of like dating in chaos, I also have to deal with like people being like, you need to find someone. Um, yeah, but I'll say internally, and I've never been the kind of person who was like I wasn't the kid who would be like planning out my life and being like, I want to get married. Like it's never been a thing. Getting married has never been like at the top of my mind. And it's still not like I don't think my life is less meaningful if I don't get married. But I'll say it's sometimes tough when everyone around you, or when it feels like everyone around you is partnered up, or when you're sitting at a gathering and like everyone's with their person and you're kind of on your own. And it's like everyone's being kind and generous and open, but it's still, I went for like not long after I had ended my relationship, I went to the coast of Kenya with some friends, and I was the only person there who was not in a relationship. So everyone was there with their partner except for me and this other guy whose partner was in Germany. So and that's like there was a point where we're all walking on the beach and I was just like, oh, just like I'm so happy for everyone, but also like, oh, I cannot do this, because everyone was holding hands and looking to the sunset, and like you could just tell like everyone was having their moment, and then I was having my own moment on my own, but it was a very different experience from what the rest were having.
How was that moment for you? What was going through your head just seeing everyone partnered up around you?
Yeah. Well, it was a whole weekend of this. So there were lots of like it was a whole weekend of like everyone sits next to their partner, and then they, like, and it's the coast, it's beautiful. It's like it's such a nice destination to go with someone you love. I'm like, so yeah, so I'm happy. I was happy for everyone, right? And this was just after I had gotten out of my relationship. But I think I was not I wasn't ready for it, and I wasn't ready for that. That's the first time I've actually been in a space where everyone else was in a serious long-term relationship. So I think I also just wasn't prepared for it. And so I feel like a lot of it is like I hadn't prepared myself for the possibility that at some point in my life I will be sitting in spaces and everyone else will be coupled up, or most people will be coupled up, and I will not. And even though even though I wouldn't think about marriage or like that wasn't at the top of my things that I need to achieve or attain, it never occurred to me that meant that, as a matter of fact, or like that would lead to me being in the spaces as a single person surrounded by all these romantic couplings. So I think a part of it is almost like I'm almost like, like this this is what it's going to be now. I'm so kind of surprised. It's a little unexpected. It's a little like, okay, like this is an adjustment, getting used to like a different kind of, I don't know, it feels very different and unexpected. Um, it was hard at the time because I was newly single. It was really, really hard. And um it was nice to be away from home at the time because I really needed to get away from, like, I needed that. But it was very tough to being in a space and to realize, oh, like I could have been here with my person and I'm not. And now I have to watch all these other people be really happy together and kind of feel a little bit sad for myself. But then also like I can't just like feel sorry for myself, because then I don't want to be the downer at this event. So I also don't I feel at the same time, sometimes I look at my friends who are like in serious relationships, like married and or approaching marriage. And when you've been friends with someone for a long time, you've seen them be messy. You've seen their best sides, but you've also seen their worst sides. And sometimes I'm like, well, if they can be if they're in a relationship and it seems to be working, like clearly there's hope for everyone. Like, and no, that sounds so rude, but less like that and more like, well, clearly then I'm not, like, it's not me. The fact that I'm not there yet doesn't mean that there's something about me that's so wrong and so broken. it's just, it's just a matter of finding my person. And so sometimes I'm like, okay, like I'll find someone who can accommodate my version of like weirdness or yeah. So I find it to be very comforting to see my friends. Like it's very reassuring in a way. But then sometimes I'm like, wait, hold on, maybe I'm just like completely disconnected to how bad. Like maybe I'm more of a mess that I'm acknowledging. But no, I think it's just reassuring to realize that, okay, like you don't need someone who's perfect. You just need someone who fits your type of like weird or your I don't like the word crazy, but like someone who fits your like oddness,
Uniqueness, but we say.
Yeah, yeah.
I use that word.
Yeah, I like uniqueness.
Is being in a long-term partnered relationship something that you're looking for and that you want in your life?
I think I think there are things that I'm still not sure about. Like what, it's sometimes it's hard to envision my life partner or something like it's hard for me to envision what they would, like it's sometimes a little hard for me to like imagine what they would look like or what they would be like it's hard for lots of reasons. Sometimes that's like a little challenging for me to conceptualize. So sometimes I feel like, well, maybe not everyone is supposed to be not maybe not everyone should get married, like maybe not everyone should be doing those things and having like maybe not everyone should be doing those things like getting married and having kids. Like maybe that's not, and like maybe that's not for all of us. And then that means like thinking about, okay, what would it mean? I think maybe that's where I'm at now, is thinking about what would it mean if I wasn't to go down that path. Like what would it mean? It would mean like more weddings where, I would go solo or I'd go with a friend, or you know um it would mean like being an aunt as my friends have children. But what would it mean? Because I think that also as a woman, especially if you decide to have children, there are certain trade-offs that you make, right? And so that for me does make me a little bit nervous, because I feel like I have like this window of a couple of years when I have to decide if I want kids or not. And I ideally wouldn't want to be doing it alone. Like I would want to have a partner, but then, you know, like, so then there's like the thought process, like, okay, if I want to have kids, what would I need in order to like set things in place to have children financially, but also like in terms of community. But then the flip side of it is, so what if I don't decide to have kids? What if I just don't decide like this is the life that I want to live? Like, how am I going to give my life meaning? And I think maybe that's also a shift that has happened as I've seen my friends take that path, is now I'm asking myself that question in a more like intentional way. And it's so scary, right? Because I feel like this is I don't know, it's scary to kind of have to think about like, how do I give my life purpose and meaning when there's this other way that other people around me are giving their life purpose and meaning. And I feel like also like I've never been the person who would like plan for my future, but I also am not. I think the people who are very clear on like they're child free by choice, they don't, like the people who are very clear on like that's who they are and like that's who, so I feel like I'm neither one of these. I'm not in either of these camps. I'm just kind of in the middle living my life and trying to. So I don't know. And I would be interesting if like we spoke a year or two from now and maybe I'd have a very different perspective.
Do you have a next date planned with anyone?
I don't have a date planned. There is someone that I was talking to and we like vaguely agreed to hang out when I got back to Nairobi. I also vaguely plan to hang out with my ex when we get back to Nairobi. So oh, I don't know, man. So who knows? No, I don't have a next date planned yet.
And the last question, do you have any advice or words of wisdom that you want to leave other listeners with who are dating?
Yeah, that's a good one. I feel like, I guess, I think something that's been really reaffirming for me, or something that's been really affirming to me as I grow older. So is just kind of listening to your gut, and it's one of those things that's tough, right? Because I'm always like asking, like, what's the difference between like just my anxiety, where sometimes I'm wrong and I'm just kind of like projecting my own fears into a situation, versus actually this person puts me ill at ease and I don't feel right about, like, and what the distinction is between the two of them. And it's so funny because like I cannot put it in words, but I feel like you kind of know. I think there's always like a deep sense of knowing. And maybe that's what you were alluding to when you said that usually within the first date, you have a sense of like, is there something here? Is there not? I do think that we tend to know. And I think we know when, like, we know on all the fronts, right? Like, we know, is this someone who's good for me? Is this someone who's like, is there an attraction here? Am I interested in this person? Are they like genuinely, like, I feel like there are things that we kind of know, but maybe we overlook because we're trying to like stay open. So, and I think on the flip side of that, I think there are times when personally I have maybe ignored my gut and like and kind of just like reasoned my way out of like what I feel or what I'm noticing about myself. So I feel like that's probably and I don't even know if I'd give this as advice to your readers, your listeners, because I'm guessing some of them already know to do this. So maybe it's advice to a younger version of myself, or anyone who's kind of like feels like they have resonance with some of the things that I'm saying, is like the importance of checking in with yourself and of taking things slow. And if someone is the right person for you, like, I don't think that they're going to disappear or stop being the right person for you tomorrow or in a week from now. So kind of like honoring that if it doesn't work out, like that's okay, and that's like part of the journey.
Dating Log is recorded and hosted by me, Wyndham Juno. It is produced by Harry Dark. Our artwork is in collaboration with Esme Hemming Studio. You can follow us on Instagram at Dating Log Podcast. Our website is datinglogpodcast.com. Check it out, we've just updated it. If you'd like to send us a message, you can slide into our Instagram DMs or send us an email at datinglogpodcast@gmail.com. Please like and subscribe wherever you listen, and if you're enjoying the episode so far, leave a review and tell a friend. We'll see you in a fortnight. Please don't ghost us.